So for my GPY 495 project, I will be examining xeriscaping, a sustainable future in the western United States. So for the abstract, the average home in the city of Denver, Colorado uses roughly 70% of its city-supplied water on irrigating the outdoor landscape of their homes. In a city that receives annually around 15 inches of rain, every drop of water needs to be preserved for essential use. As population throughout Denver and the surrounding Colorado suburbs continues to grow, water usage levels must be monitored and preserved in order to avoid droughts. Xeriscaping offers an out-of-the-box attempt at water conservation and sustainable development throughout the region of the western United States. The overall goal of this project and presentation is to illustrate and explain the practice of xeriscaping and why it is necessary in the city of Denver, Colorado. As well as explaining its principles and necessity, this presentation will look at the cost-benefit analysis of installing a xeric landscape. You may ask why I chose Denver, Colorado for this presentation. Denver was selected as the center city of this case study due to its arid and harsh climate throughout the year. On average, Denver usually receives 16.1 inches of rainwater annually. The average United States city receives roughly 39.1 inches of rainwater annually. Denver is known for its harsh winters and warm summers, and there's not a lot of in-between, so that this city represents a great case study center. You may find yourself asking, what is a xeriscape? A xeriscape is a landscape that is designed and implemented into a landscape that can be residential, commercial, private, any landscape on the earth. And its main purpose is to conserve water and preserve water and implement natural plants to help preserve the water for the climate and region. So the word xeriscape means water conservation through creative landscape. The word itself is derived from the Greek word xeros, which means dry, and the word scape, from the word landscape. So the term xeriscaping was originally coined in the mid to late 1980s in Denver, Colorado by a Denver water scientist. While they did not invent water-conscious landscape design, they did invent the term as a part of a campaign to familiarize citizens with water-wise landscape design. The main goal of this campaign was to inform citizens of the practice of xeriscaping and water-wise landscape design in order to help preserve the city of Denver's water and save the city from droughts in the future. So next I will walk you through the 7 principles of xeriscape landscape design. So the first principle in landscaping with a xeriscaping mindset is sound landscape planning and design. So this is preparing and planning out your landscape before you implement it into your yard. So one of the first steps is having your xeriscape plans approved by an accredited professional or a city water expert. And the plan also has to be realistic and meet the goals of water conservation and preservation while also being aesthetically pleasing to you and your yard. You don't want to build a landscape that you're not going to like to look at. So when planning out and designing your future xeriscape, you need to make sure that it meets all of these qualifications and is prepared and ready to conserve water. Next principle of xeriscaping is limitation of turf, or your lawn, to appropriate and functional areas of the landscape. So most people think with a xeriscape, and this is a main deterrent of potential implementers, is that you have to completely remove your grass and lawn, and you're just going to have rocks and shrubs and cactuses and plants. And this isn't completely true. So don't completely remove all of your grass and lawn. You can leave it where it is necessary or appropriate or where you would like it. Don't cover the entire yard with it though, and be wise about where you keep it. Certain grass need to have certain exposure to sunlight, and certain grass need to be in the shade. So you need to keep your grass and turf in appropriate functional areas of your yard. Don't put it in areas that are always going to flood, where the water drains to, and keep it in safe, functional areas that will allow you to preserve water and keep the grass healthy and alive. Third principle of xeriscaping is using the use of water-efficient plants. So use plants that don't require gallons of water every year to water, and plants that are native to the region and can thrive with natural irrigation. The native plants implementation is one of the most important aspects of xeriscaping due to their naturalness and familiarity with the climate. These plants are from the climate and they have grown there and are able to thrive in these drought-ridden areas due to their familiarity and home in the area. They're built and they grow. They're built for these areas to survive and thrive in. And they don't require as much water as certain other plants that people will like to plant in these drought-ridden areas. The fourth principle of xeriscaping is an efficient irrigation system. So when you're planning and designing your xeriscape, you need to plan and design an efficient irrigation system for the landscape. You can't overwater certain plants and sections of the landscape, and you need to be mindful of which direction the water slides and drains in. Installing an efficient irrigation system will allow you to conserve your water by only having it placed and sprayed in places that it is absolutely necessary. And with certain switches and timers, you're able to control how much water is sent to certain areas and how much water will be used throughout a course of time on your landscape. The fifth principle of xeriscaping is soil amendments and what soil is being used in your landscape. Certain soils have different porosities, as clay soil is less porous and water will run right off of it and not soak in as much, as sandy and rocky soil absorbs more water and keeps it longer inside of its system rather than having it run off the top of the ground just like clay soil does. Sandy and rocky soil are also drier, which keeps the landscape drier and warmer and not as moist, as clay soil keeps the water on top longer and more wet. You also must be mindful of which soil is being used in your yard, as certain plants and shrubbery are not able to grow properly and expand their roots in certain types of soil. So when implementing natural plants to the landscape, you must use natural soil that will allow the plants to thrive. The sixth principle of xeriscaping is mulch use, and this is mulch use in mainly your land cover selection, what you choose to cover most of your land. You can choose mulch, rocks, turf. Mulch is used mainly as ground cover and water absorbent to protect soil and plant roots that lie beneath the surface. Black and darker mulches are not as ideal due to their likeliness to attract heat and sun as well as dry out faster. Mulch is a good source of hydration and water preservation for the xeriscape due to its ability to hold on to the water inside of itself for longer, and it keeps the water, it serves as a layer between the soil and the sun to keep the water in the soil from being evaporated out quicker. So mulch use and ground cover is a very important aspect in water conservation for xeriscapes. So the seventh and final principle of xeriscaping is appropriate landscape maintenance. This involves efficient irrigation cycles, weed and pest control, and shade and sunlight management. All of this can be accredited to the labor and the landscape maintenance that you have to put into your yard. Xeriscapes are often low maintenance and low irrigation needed, so they often present low maintenance and management labor options for implementers to consider. All seven principles of the previous seven slides were studied and adapted slightly from The Seven Principles of Xeriscape by Becca Rodomsky-Bish. Now that we know what xeriscaping is and its main principles, I'm going to dive deeper into how xeriscaping has affected the city of Denver and efforts the city itself has put into the Denver Water Program to promote xeriscaping throughout the city. The methodology for my presentation and research was studying previous case studies and examining their results and reviewing them in this project to retrieve data and numbers to back xeriscaping as a viable, sustainable development. Denver climate and precipitation patterns will also be examined and studied to determine the effect it has on the western region of the United States, mainly Denver. Main principles and uses of xeriscaping will be examined on implementation throughout Denver and the city's efforts to promote this sustainable lifestyle landscape. So the first case study that I will be examining is the yield and reliability demonstrated in Xeriscape case study, or YARDX, executed in the Denver metropolitan area. This case study assessed the need for more sustainable water practices throughout the region, as well as the cost benefits of xeric landscaping. This case study was performed by the Colorado nonprofit Metro Water Conservation Inc. and National Xeriscape Demonstration Program. This program went through the city and offered citizens rebates and rewards for their participation in the study, and the main goal was to convince citizens to tear out their old landscape and turn it into a xeric landscape. And through this process, the city offered rebates and rewards for their participation. So the main feature goals and main feature points of the YARDX case study were maintenance costs of the xeriscaped landscape, the savings on the water bill for the citizens, installation fees of the xeric landscape, and actual water savings for the city itself and the citizens. A prominent goal of the YARDX project was to assess whether xeric landscapes save water over traditional landscapes. Determining this involved comparing water use between treatment samples and their counterpart control samples. Treatment samples were xeric landscapes and counterpart control samples were traditional landscapes. Comparisons needed for each demonstration, cross-demonstration comparisons were also of interest. So these landscapes were landscapes that were partially landscaped with a xeric mindset. Essentially, the YARDX campaign paid the citizens of Denver, Colorado to convert their lawn and landscape to a xeric landscape, and they studied the effects to then use these results and numbers they would receive from this test to promote xeric landscaping throughout the region. As you can see in this chart to the right, the average monthly precipitation in Denver, Colorado rarely reaches above 2 inches per month annually. This presents a good opportunity for the YARDX group to study this area due to the lack of rainwater and the harsh climate of Denver. Another main reason as why Denver presented a great case study center city is due to the rapidly rising population with the declining water supply. As you can see in this chart to the right, the Denver population is almost reaching 1.3 million people within the city limits, as the water supply in millions of gallons is nearly 100 million. This does not present a good supply of water for the city, therefore making Denver a good study case center for the YARDX case study. Pictured below in this chart is an average single-family water use breakdown. As you can see, about 50% of the water usage in the family household is for essential uses such as toilet water, showering, washing machine, faucets, and dishwashing, and other. And then the complete other 50% of usage is for total outdoor landscape maintenance usage. This presents a huge waste of essential water in an area that every water drop needs to be preserved and conserved for usage, as droughts often ride through the area. This 50% of total outdoor usage proves that it can up to double the amount of a water bill just through the landscape maintenance, which is obviously not appealing to residents. Xeric landscapes offer an alternative to lower water bills and preserve water at the same time. It can be seen as a win-win for the resident and the city. After 4 years of studying xeric lawns that had been converted from traditional landscapes to xeric landscapes, the difference between a traditional landscape's water bill and water saving and a xeric landscape's water bill and water saving, on average in the Denver metropolitan area, citizens could expect to save at least 30% to over 50% on their water bill and water intake after switching to a xeric landscape. Citizens within the Denver city limits were estimated to save at least 28% on their water bill over time after switching their lawns to xeriscapes. As well as savings on the water bill, the Yardic study also determined a decrease in cost and labor for yard maintenance. Installation costs ranged between 90 cents to $1.30 per square foot of an average Denver lawn. Next, I'm going to look at some of the Denver water sustainability efforts that have been promoted throughout the city's water program, Denver Water. Denver and surrounding cities within Colorado State offer rebates to their citizens for converting their lawns and landscapes to xeriscapes. Some cities, such as Thornton, right outside Denver city limits between Denver and Golden, Colorado, offer up to $1 per square foot changed. It's $1 per square foot, Thornton homeowner Elisa Hake said. Hake is one of more than a dozen residents who have chosen to take part in the WaterWise landscaping rebate. She changed over 1,900 square feet of backyard and turf into a xeriscape garden of stones, mulch, and low-water plants. This all presents a great xeriscaping effort. As you can see in the images below, this is a Colorado water campaign from the Denver Water Society. As you can see in the bench example in the middle, use only what you need. This shows that when one person only sits down, they only need the one seat on the bench. The rest of it is still available for something else. So, use only what you need applies to water, with when water is a scarcity in Denver, use only what you need. When you can cut corners and save water in certain aspects that aren't an essential use, take them. All the efforts put forth by the city of Denver prove forth that the city believes in the science behind xeriscaping. Seen as a sustainable and viable option, xeriscaping is spreading throughout Denver and the rest of the country. Denver offers cities around the USA a perfect outline of how to lead a campaign toward water sustainability and sustainable landscape development. Not only does the case study performed by Yardex confirm that xeriscaping a landscape will save money, but will also save water for the citizens. Denver and Yardex offered a perfect outline of how to lead a campaign toward water sustainability for a city. Overall, xeriscaping proves to be a vital and precious practice in the future of the Denver, Colorado urban city. Throughout the city's efforts and movements, xeriscapes are becoming more recognizable and somewhat of the norm in Denver. All of this helps promote a more sustainable future for Denver water. These are my following sources.